We're not happy with Venezuela for a lot of reasons, drugs being one of them. At first light in the Caribbean Sea, near the edge of Venezuela's exclusive economic zone, American radar screens picked up faint underwater movement that did not match the patterns normally seen during routine patrols. The data was unclear, and the sonar picture showed only scattered echoes. Yet 2 Venezuelan submarines were already closing in beneath the surface. The United States believed the area was calm, but the approach suggested that something was moving toward the formation with intent. What Venezuela perceived as a chance to pressure a single amphibious ship was in reality a silent approach toward a fully armed United States carrier strike group. The formation moved through the morning waters with the confidence of a force protected by layered sensors and coordinated defense. But it remained unaware that another navy had misinterpreted its presence. This leads to the central question behind the incident: could a single warning torpedo fired under a false belief have been enough to push 2 nations toward the edge of a naval confrontation? If you want to follow how this near miss unfolded and why small mistakes at sea can reshape global security, make sure to subscribe to Titan Navy so you never miss the next critical update. The chain of events that shaped this encounter became more serious once outdated radar information reached the Venezuelan submarine crews. The report they received described a large American vessel moving alone near the boundary of the exclusive economic zone. The message did not reflect the true situation at sea because the radar return had been delayed by several hours. When information arrives with this level of latency, the position, speed, and identity of the contact may no longer be accurate. The submarine crews, however, had no way to verify the data through independent sensors since they were operating under strict emissions control. Their orders required them to close the distance quietly and observe the target from below the thermal layer, which meant they had to commit to the information provided even if it was incomplete. The S-21 Bolivar and the S-23 Sucre both relied on diesel-electric power systems that allow short periods of silent movement. These submarines often use underwater terrain and temperature layers to reduce their acoustic profile. As they advanced toward the location marked on their charts, they encountered a series of strong and irregular noises coming from the surface. The sounds carried through the water with heavy intensity. The crews interpreted them as indicators of a large ship conducting routine deck activity. Because their mission brief described a single amphibious vessel, the noise seemed consistent with an American ship preparing helicopters or internal equipment. They continued their approach at reduced speed to maintain a low signature while attempting to gauge distance by sound alone. Once the submarines reached what they believed was the edge of the engagement zone, they prepared the weapon system. Diesel-electric submarines are often used in coastal defense roles, and their crews train for situations where they must deliver firm messages without entering open conflict. The choice of a shallow-running torpedo was based on this training. The crew of the S-21 Bolivar activated the necessary systems, adjusted the settings for a limited run, and released the weapon into the water column. Modern torpedoes generate a clear and immediate acoustic signature when launched. This signature was not hidden by the thermal layer and rapidly spread outward. The launch of the torpedo marked a turning point in the situation, not because of the device itself, but because of the difference in how each side understood the meaning of that event. The Venezuelan crews judged the action as a measured warning that followed their mission requirements. They saw the torpedo as a controlled tool that would end its run and neutralize itself before posing any danger. The United States Navy, however, interprets any torpedo launch as a genuine threat regardless of its depth setting or fuse configuration. This divide in perception ensured that the moment the torpedo left the tube, the encounter changed from a misreading of radar to a crisis at sea. The consequences of this misunderstanding would become visible as the American strike group reacted to what it believed was a direct threat to one of its most valuable naval assets. The situation in the Caribbean changed rapidly once the American strike group detected the first signs of underwater activity. The United States Navy maintains highly sensitive acoustic monitoring systems on its destroyers designed to detect irregular movements in the water. During the early hours of the morning, one of the destroyers assigned to the outer screen registered a faint pattern of cavitation. Cavitation appears when a propeller blade moves through water at a rate that creates tiny vapor bubbles, and this effect can reveal the presence of a submarine even when it is attempting to remain concealed. The pattern was not clear enough to identify a specific vessel, yet it was unusual enough to alert the operations team. The destroyer reduced speed to lower its own acoustic footprint, allowing the towed array to produce a cleaner picture of the surrounding conditions. The strike group responds to underwater anomalies with deliberate and coordinated steps. When a single contact appears without confirmation, the ships adjust their speed and alignment to create more favorable listening conditions. This is a routine measure intended to separate natural underwater noise from the sounds produced by engines or mechanical systems. As the American vessels settled into the slower pace, the sonar stations began to receive sharper signals from the region where the cavitation had been detected. The improved clarity helped the operators recognize a pattern that differed from marine life or distant fishing vessels. The technicians marked the bearing and continued to evaluate the acoustic environment in case another signal appeared. The nature of the contact changed instantly once the Venezuelan torpedo left its tube. Modern sonar equipment is capable of identifying the unique signature of a torpedo launch with high reliability. When the weapon entered the water, the acoustic burst spread outward and reached the American sensors. The sound showed a clear and direct movement. This pattern indicated a powered device that had begun its run and was traveling along a predictable line. The moment the signal appeared on the screen, the operations team recognized the seriousness of the development and forwarded the information across the command network within the strike group. The carrier destroyers and cruiser transitioned from routine movement to combat preparation. Every vessel shifted posture in order to protect the central asset of the formation. The aircraft carrier responded by adjusting course to increase its distance from the projected path of the torpedo. Although the device was on a shallow setting, American procedures do not allow assumptions about the depth or purpose of a torpedo once it has begun its travel. The escort ships widened their spacing to create a more effective defensive perimeter. This formation change allowed each vessel to deploy its own systems without obstructing the movements of others. The decoys on the destroyers were activated to create misleading acoustic signals in the water. These systems mimic the noise of a large ship and draw the attention of an incoming torpedo. The deployment of decoys is a routine part of American defensive doctrine and is used to complicate the targeting process for any underwater threat. The air wing of the carrier received the alert at the same moment. The MH-60R helicopter assigned to anti-submarine duties prepared for immediate launch. This aircraft carries sensors designed to locate submarines and can deploy torpedoes such as the Mk-54 once a threat has been confirmed. The helicopter crews worked quickly to bring the aircraft into position since airborne sensors provide valuable coverage during underwater incidents. These tools allow the United States to build a full acoustic picture of a developing event and support the decisions made by commanders at sea. The situation inside the American Combat Information Center intensified once the torpedo completed its short run and activated its self-destruct mechanism. Modern torpedoes carry internal charges that are programmed to detonate at the end of a preset distance. These charges are designed to neutralize the weapon before it reaches deeper waters, helping prevent loose ordnance from drifting toward unintended areas. Although the device released by the Venezuelan submarine followed this programmed pattern, the acoustic signature of the detonation produced a shock wave that behaved in the same way as the final explosion of a hostile weapon. The sonar arrays aboard the American ships registered the blast as a strong and concentrated pulse. This type of signal is identical to the end of a torpedo's terminal phase when it fails to strike a target and explodes at the conclusion of its search cycle. American sonar operators work with a structured method of interpreting underwater activity. They analyze sequences of events rather than isolated sounds, and this helps them assess the level of danger. In this case, the pattern they observed began with the detection of two separate contacts moving toward the formation. The next step in the sequence was the recognition of a torpedo launch. That launch was followed by the rapid movement of a powered device. When the explosion occurred, the sequence was complete. Every part of the chain matched the acoustic picture of a real attack, which meant the combat system classified the event as a direct threat to the group. The operators continued to gather data, yet the overall assessment did not change because the signals aligned with a hostile approach. The carrier strike group treats any torpedo explosion near its defensive perimeter as a matter of serious concern. Torpedo detonations create unique pressure waves that expand quickly through seawater and strike the hulls of nearby ships. These waves disrupt acoustic readings for a brief moment and make it difficult to identify additional contacts. The blast recorded by the American sensors produced a clear break in the surrounding sound environment. This interruption carried the same characteristics as a war shot, because the strike group follows strict protective steps. In environments where submarines may be present, the destroyers and cruiser adjusted their positions to maximize the protection of the carrier. Each movement was conducted with the expectation that a second launch could occur. The interpretation of the torpedo detonation placed significant pressure on the command staff. They had to assume that the weapon was not a harmless signal. Their experience and training required them to view the event as an example of a real threat that had not reached its target. The chain of acoustic events fit the expected pattern of an attempted strike. Therefore, the officers prepared for the possibility that the submarines could release another weapon that might not fail or self-destruct at the end of its run. This expectation compelled the entire formation to remain alert, while waiting for further information that could confirm or reduce the assessed level of danger. The tension created by this assessment shaped the decisions that would follow as the night continued and the strike group maintained its defensive posture. The events inside the American strike group reached their most critical point when the defensive systems prepared for the possibility of immediate engagement. The destroyers and the cruiser had already adjusted their positions to protect the carrier, and the air wing had placed an anti-submarine helicopter in a ready posture. The American formation operates with a layered defense structure that includes surface-launched weapons, airborne sensors, and advanced tracking systems. When the torpedo explosion was registered by sonar, each part of this structure moved to a higher state of readiness. The surface ships confirmed the range of their anti-submarine rockets. The aircrew responsible for deploying the Mk-54 torpedo prepared for a launch window. These steps were conducted rapidly because the safety of the carrier is central to United States naval operations. The rules that govern defensive action at sea establish specific thresholds for engagement. A torpedo that enters the water and moves toward a protected asset is considered a threat that can justify the use of force. The strike group followed this framework as it processed the data from the explosion. The acoustic sequence indicated the presence of two approaching contacts, the launch of a torpedo, and a detonation that matched the profile of a hostile weapon at the end of its cycle. These indicators created a strong case for an immediate military response. The command staff had to measure the need to protect the carrier against the possibility that the explosion did not represent a continuing attack. This type of assessment must be completed within seconds, because waiting too long can expose the formation to serious danger. The choice to pause for 3 seconds formed the center of the American response. During this pause, the operators monitored the sonar displays for any sign of a returning acoustic signature associated with a live torpedo. A functioning torpedo produces a distinct pattern that becomes more pronounced as it approaches a target. It increases its speed during the acquisition phase and creates a recognizable drive noise. If such signals had appeared on the screens, the strike group would have initiated a defensive attack to protect the carrier. The crew therefore used the 3 seconds to search the water for these patterns. The sonar system did not detect any trace of a continuing threat. The absence of these signals marked a key point in the assessment. The command staff then interpreted the information as evidence that the torpedo had completed its run and exploded at the end of its programmed distance. This interpretation carried significant weight because it removed the immediate basis for engagement. Once this conclusion gained support from the acoustic data, the command issued the order to maintain a defensive posture without firing. The decision aligned with American doctrine, which aims to deter threats while avoiding unnecessary escalation. The strike group remained alert, but the absence of additional indicators allowed it to hold its position rather than take aggressive action. This decision had wider strategic implications because of the sensitivity of the region. The Caribbean has experienced increased naval activity due to a combination of counter-narcotics operations, territorial disputes, and political tension between the United States and Venezuela. An exchange of fire between the two sides could have signaled a much larger crisis. The choice to wait for a brief moment before taking action reflected a calculated approach designed to balance military necessity with regional stability. It demonstrated the importance of precise judgment at sea. The 3-second pause illustrated how controlled decision-making can prevent a tactical misunderstanding from turning into a crisis with broader consequences. Through this act of restraint, the strike group protected its critical asset and preserved stability across a region already marked by political and security challenges. The incident began with a technical weakness inside Venezuela's coastal surveillance system, and this weakness shaped every decision that followed. The coastal radar stations along the Venezuelan shoreline work with older processing units that struggle to separate complex returns from multiple ships moving in formation. When radar waves travel across long distances in humid and unstable weather, the signals can bend and disperse, which affects the ability of older screens to show detailed outlines. Over a period of almost 2 days, the operators at these stations continued to see a large and unstable radar return near the edge of the country's exclusive economic zone. The image appeared and disappeared through patches of interference, and each pass of the antenna produced only a single large object. To the technicians on the ground, it looked like a solitary ship with unusual size but steady movement along the maritime boundary. The real situation at sea was much more complex. The United States was sailing a carrier strike group through international waters. This formation included a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier surrounded by multiple destroyers, a cruiser, and several support ships. Each vessel produced its own radar signature. Yet, the combination of atmospheric conditions and the aging Venezuelan equipment caused the individual returns to merge into a single block. This effect can occur when older radar systems lack modern filtering programs, since they cannot reliably separate overlapping reflections. As a result, the collective signature of the strike group appeared on Venezuelan screens as one large target moving at moderate speed. From the perspective of Venezuelan military planners, the presence of a ship of that size so close to the exclusive economic zone required attention. Recent years had produced several tense exchanges between both countries, and Caracas believed Washington was increasing its intelligence-gathering activities in the Caribbean. For this reason, the radar image did not look accidental. Analysts inside the Venezuelan operations room reviewed the returns again, and each cycle reinforced their belief that the object was a single amphibious ship. These ships normally carry helicopters and marines, and their missions often involve operations near coastlines or contested areas. Because the radar system showed no signs of additional escorts, officers concluded that the vessel was acting independently, which is unusual for a major American asset. This interpretation helped build the belief that the United States was conducting a deliberate test of Venezuelan awareness. The information available to the United States at the same moment told a very different story. American ships were moving along a legal maritime corridor and were not aware that Venezuelan sensors were producing such distorted readings. The strike group carried advanced navigation and communication equipment and received regular intelligence updates about regional activity. There was no indication that any foreign radar site was misidentifying the formation. From the American perspective, the transit was routine, and there was no expectation that another navy might interpret the movement as a challenge. This misunderstanding created the foundation for the next set of decisions. The Venezuelan command structure interpreted the mysterious presence as a sign that the United States wanted to observe their reaction or influence their behavior through proximity. They judged that allowing the large unknown contact to remain near the boundary without a response would encourage further American movement toward the coast. In their view, a controlled approach with submarines could show readiness without escalating to open confrontation. The instructions that followed came from this interpretation, and not from an understanding of the true scale of the American formation. The final stage of the incident revealed how quickly both sides adjusted once the consequences of the earlier decisions became clear. The Venezuelan submarines retreated from the area after the shockwave from the detonation spread through the water, and the sound of large American vessels moving into new defensive positions reached their sensors. These signals indicated that the contact above them was far larger and more complex than a single amphibious ship. The crews recognized that they had approached a carrier strike group with significant firepower. They reduced their speed until their movement was barely detectable and descended below the thermocline, where the surrounding temperature layer could mask their acoustic trail. The American formation continued to monitor the contacts as they weakened and moved away from the defensive perimeter. The destroyer and the cruiser maintained their acoustic tracking until the signals became too faint to classify. The helicopter assigned to anti-submarine duties extended its search pattern to confirm that the submarines had left the area. The decision not to pursue reflected a measured approach that balanced readiness with restraint. The strike group remained prepared for any additional threat, yet it avoided actions that could escalate the situation. This posture aligned with broader American objectives in the region, since stability in the Caribbean supports ongoing maritime security operations. The outcome provided a reminder that the actions taken in a few seconds can influence wider regional dynamics. The decision by the American command to hold fire for a brief moment prevented a situation shaped by misunderstanding from turning into open conflict. It demonstrated that disciplined judgment can serve as an essential element of national security. For audiences following developments in the region, the event raises an important question about how officers make decisions during moments of extreme pressure. When a threat appears on sonar and time is limited, the choice between immediate action and further confirmation becomes central to the safety of the entire formation. The incident leaves observers considering how they would respond under similar conditions and how much responsibility rests on a single moment of choice at sea. The sea may look calm now, but this confrontation is only the beginning. If you want to follow every unexpected development in military conflicts, subscribe to Titan Navy to stay updated on what happens next.